Which one is best, the Doomsday Ark or Necron Heavy Destroyers? Well, let's find out in today's Necron Tactics 2020 video. It's coming right up. Yes, we have a winner!
Necrons!
Nick speaking, and welcome to this video. And if you're new to the channel and you want to keep up to date with all things Necrons, then please subscribe and hit the bell button to turn on all notifications so you don't miss an upload. Okay, so time for another comparison video, the Doomsday Ark versus Heavy Destroyers. Now, most good Necron lists have at least 2 or 3 Doomsday Arks in, but with Heavy Destroyers getting some points reductions in chapter approved just gone, can the Heavy Destroyers replace Doomsday Arks? I've seen some very mixed responses to that question. Some people saying definitely Destroyers are awesome now and they definitely can do the job, and others saying that Doomsday Arks are still the mainstay of the army. And that's what I want to have a closer look at today. I really enjoy making these comparison videos, so if you enjoy watching them, then why not press the like button? I would really appreciate it because it really helps me out. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to put up a picture of each of these units and I'm going to use a tick scoring system to find out, to help us decide which one is best. Now, first of all, I want to talk about the price of these two units. Okay, so looking at the Games Workshop prices for this video, of course you can buy them cheaper elsewhere, but GW charge you £32.50 for a Doomsday Ark, and then the total price of 3 Heavy Destroyers is £46.50. Now, you have to buy 3 Destroyers at £30 and then 3 upgrade kits at £5.50 each, which is how you get your £46.50 price. However, those upgrade kits are made of fine cast and the Heavy Destroyer gun is quite long and fragile, and the fine cast, well, it's not the best product in the world from Games Workshop. I'd actually recommend you convert your Heavy Destroyer guns from your guns in your bits box. That would actually make the Heavy Destroyers cheaper than the Doomsday Ark if you did that. However, on paper, on the Games Workshop website, the Doomsday Arks are definitely cheaper than the Heavy Destroyers, so they will get the first tick. Okay, so next up is the point values. So 3 Heavy Destroyers, a unit of 3, is going to cost you 111 points, coming down recently in chapter approved. The Doomsday Ark is going to cost you 160. Now, if you start taking these in multiples of 3, which is what we're really talking about here in this video, well, you're saving yourself 147 points in total by taking Heavy Destroyers. So Heavy Destroyers will get a tick for the points value. Right, next up I want to look at the stats line. Now, this is slightly hard to do because, well, one is a vehicle and one is infantry, so they don't really compare side by side too well. However, I do want to have a closer look at the stats. I'm going to split these into 3 little categories. So first of all is the ballistic skill, movement and weapon skill. So they both have ballistic skill 3, however the Doomsday Ark does degrade as it takes wounds, degrading that ballistic skill, and also the movement reflects that as well. It's 12 inches on the Doomsday Ark and 10 inches on the Heavy Destroyers. However, as it takes wounds, that movement gets less. The weapon skill is 6 on the Doomsday Ark and it's 3 on the Heavy Destroyers. Not that you want to get either of these into close combat, but definitely those first 3 stats there, the Heavy Destroyers will get the first tick. However, the Doomsday Ark is strength and toughness 6, and it has 14 wounds. The Heavy Destroyers are strength 4, toughness 5 with 3 wounds each, so effectively 9 wounds. So that's a tick for the Doomsday Ark. Now, looking at the save, the Doomsday Ark has a 4+ and the Heavy Destroyers is a 3+. And as infantry, it's far easier for Heavy Destroyers to get a cover save, taking that down to a 2+. So in terms of the save, well, that's another tick for the Heavy Destroyers. Now we talked about keywords just then, so let's have a closer look at them. Now they both have the fly keyword. It makes movement a lot easier. It also means that we can fall back and still shoot. Yes, the Doomsday Ark has a few restrictions on that, but you still have the Gauss flare that you can shoot. Now, in terms of the infantry keyword, which we talked about, then yes, the destroyers do have a benefit because they can find it easier to get cover. It's also easier for them to move in buildings. You can move through walls and up and down the levels quite easy. Plus, you have the ability to unlock some of the special rules that's available to us, like My Will Be Done. We'll talk more about that later in the video, but for now, it's another tick for the heavy destroyers. Okay, so the Doomsday Ark is lagging behind a bit at the moment. However, we're going to look at the abilities next, and the Doomsday Ark has quantum shielding, which is very useful on a tank with multiple wounds. So we get our normal save, which of course is a 4+, and then we get a quantum shielding save for the damage which is coming in. And the idea is you roll a dice, and if you roll lower than the damage which is being inflicted, then you ignore that damage totally. We also have a stratagem to give us -1 to our quantum shielding dice roll, and that works even if we roll a 1, it turns it into a 0. So, very useful, especially for big guns that do a lot of damage. Not quite so useful for damage 2 and 3. Those type of guns can go through our quantum shielding fairly easily, but at least it stops those big guns taking us out quickly. So it's definitely a tick for the Doomsday Ark. Now the Doomsday Ark also has living metal. Now okay, you've got reanimation protocol on the destroyers, we'll talk more about that in a minute. However, living metal is a guaranteed 1 wound back each turn after you start taking damage. Now of course you can manipulate that if you have a cryptek or maybe a spider nearby, making that D3 damage back. However, a guaranteed 1 damage back each turn is a point for the Doomsday Ark. So we mentioned reanimation protocol on the heavy destroyers, which is a great ability to have, allowing us to bring back the models as they're killed, as long as the whole unit isn't wiped out. Coming back on a 5+ natively, or a 4+ with a cryptek nearby, and they come back with all 3 wounds. This is really good. The only disadvantage, of course, is on a small unit, a unit of 3, effectively 9 wounds, it can be quite easy to target and take out your destroyer unit. However, if your enemy chooses to shoot at your heavy destroyers and they don't take the whole unit out, well then they have to commit more resources to killing the whole unit. That in itself is an advantage. So it's going to be a tick for reanimation protocol on the heavy destroyers. Now heavy destroyers have the ability to move and shoot their heavy weapon with no penalties. That's really useful, especially as they can move 10 inches, effectively giving you an extra 10-inch range on the guns. Worth a tick. Not only that, but you can re-roll the 1s to hit as a native ability. So again, another tick for the heavy destroyers. Okay, so let's have a look at the gun options, and I think this is where it's going to get quite interesting. The Doomsday Cannon on the Doomsday Ark and the Heavy Gauss Cannon on the Heavy Destroyers. I'm going to start to grade these guns separately, so let's change up the 2 options. This will lead to one final tick at the end, but somehow we've got to compare these 2 guns. Okay, so both of these guns are heavy, however the heavy destroyers can move and shoot their gun with no penalties. The gun range is 36 inches and they can move 10. Effectively we've got a 46-inch reach. Being able to move and shoot that gun is very useful indeed, especially on this small unit of heavy destroyers, which, well, turn 1 we're probably going to be hiding them behind a piece of terrain, and then we can move and shoot our guns. That's really useful and will give them a tick. However, the Doomsday Cannon on the Doomsday Ark is 72 inches. Now, yes, we can't move and shoot that gun, but 72 inches, what a huge reach that is, especially useful for when you're playing hammer and anvil. That's a big reach and definitely worth a tick, even though we can't move and shoot it. Now we do have the option to move and shoot that gun, but at a lower capacity. So it's a 36-inch range, and it's still a heavy, so it's still -1 to hit. However, if you're in the Sotek dynasty, where you could ignore that -1, you still can't shoot it at its full capacity, but you can shoot it at its lower range. 36 inches plus a potential 12-inch movement, but again it's still a big reach. So it's a tick for the ability on the Doomsday Ark to shoot either stationary or move and shoot. Now it's not just the range of the gun that does change when you move, it's also the strength and the power output and the damage that it does. However, if it stays stationary, that 72-inch gun is strength 10, -5 AP, and it does D6 damage. The heavy destroyer gun is strength 9, -4 AP, and does D6 damage. So from those stats, it's another tick for the Doomsday Ark. Now looking at those stats again, of course, strength 10 versus strength 9, well, the 10 is going to be better if you're shooting at toughness 5, and the AP, well, AP 4 is very good, but if you had, say, a prepared positioned tank, well, they still get a 6+ save. With that -5 AP, you're going to take that totally away. So those little extras on the gun really do help. Now they both do D6 damage, a bit of a problem for Necrons. Our hard-hitting guns are very random in terms of their damage. However, the Doomsday Arks are also random for the amount of shots that you get. You get D6 shots. That means you roll a dice. If you roll a 1, maybe a 2, you're not going to get many shots through. However, if you roll well, 4, 5, 6, well, that is a pretty awesome amount. However, it is random, and the heavy destroyers isn't random because you get 1 shot each. So effectively, a unit of 3 will give you a guaranteed 3 shots. Now this is where the big debate seems to be, because 3 units of 3 heavy destroyers is a guaranteed 9 shots, whereas 3 Doomsday Arks can be anything from 3 shots to 18 shots. Now 18 shots sounds great, but are you going to roll 3 6s? I suppose on average you're going to roll a 3 or a 4, so you're probably going to have a similar amount of shots to the heavy destroyers, but it is very random. This is a bit of an issue, and I think this is where everyone will probably disagree. Let me know what you think in the comments box below. Would you rather have guaranteed 9 shots? Or would you rather have between 3 and 18 random shots? Personally, I quite like the random of the Doomsday Arks because, well, if you roll well, and I like to think that I roll well, you're going to get a good amount of shots through, and it's the excitement of rolling those 5s and 6s and getting a lot of shots through, which is really nice to have. And I suppose you do have a re-roll on one of your command points if you don't roll particularly well with 1 dice. I'm going to give the Doomsday Ark a point for their rather random guns. But do you think I made a mistake? Do you think heavy destroyers should have got the tick? Let me know in the comments below. Of course, you have to take into consideration the survivability of these 3 guns. Whilst it's nice to have a guaranteed 9 shots, how many turns are you going to have those 9 shots? 3 units of 3, okay, you might be able to hide them 1 turn, but eventually you're going to have to expose yourself, and they're probably going to go down a lot quicker than 3 Doomsday Arks with their quantum shielding and 14 wounds. Just something to consider. Now if you do move your Doomsday Ark, as I said, the gun gets slightly weaker. So it's 36 inches, it's strength 8, it's -2 AP, and it's D3 damage. Not quite the tank killer that it is when it stands still, but reasonable, and at least you have the option to move and shoot. And that's one reason why I like to play my Doomsday Arks in the Sotek dynasty, giving me that ability to move and not have the penalties for moving. Now of course, if you took them in the Nihilic dynasty, you could re-roll the 1s. I have to take a Triarch Stalker to give me the ability to re-roll the 1s with my Doomsday Ark. Of course, heavy destroyers automatically get to re-roll the 1s to hit, and that is very useful, and of course is a point for the gun options compared to the Doomsday Ark. Not only that, but as we said previously, you've got the infantry keyword, so you are able to have a lord or maybe a destroyer lord nearby, allowing you to re-roll the ones to wound as well as hit, which you can't get with Doomsday Arks. Not only that, you have the extermination stratagem as well for 1 CP, allowing you to re-roll all the hits and all the wounds. So it's another tick for the heavy destroyer gun. However, the Doomsday Ark gun, in my opinion, just pips the heavy destroyers at the post. So going back to our other chart, and it's another tick for the Doomsday Ark. Now, talking of guns, the Doomsday Ark also has 2 Gauss Flare arrays. These are rapid fire 5 each, so we've got 10 shots at 24 inches and we've got 20 shots at 12 inches. Now those are strength for -1 AP with just 1 damage. However, that's a good amount of shots and very useful, not just for complementing the Doomsday Ark, but complementing the rest of the army once the enemy starts to close in. So the flare arrays are going to give the Doomsday Ark another tick. They're very useful as a defensive weapon. If your enemy gets close, maybe they're going to assault you, you've got some overwatch options. So very useful indeed, but more importantly, if your big gun becomes redundant, maybe you've killed all of the big stuff on the table, or maybe there was no big stuff there to start with, well now the Doomsday Ark becomes a totally different unit. You have the option to be quite aggressive with your Doomsday Arks, using them a little bit like we did in the Ghost Ark Tactics. Use them as a battering ram, push them forward, get those rapid fire guns in range. 14 wounds, quantum shielding, toughness 6. Your enemy is going to have to either put a lot of resources into killing them or to ignore them totally. And then of course we can then start assaulting their units that don't have the fly special rule, stopping them from falling back and shooting. 3 battering ram Doomsday Arks, well that is nothing to be sniffed at, and definitely another tick for the Doomsday Ark. Okay, so next let's have a look at how we get these units into our list. So one advantage of the heavy destroyers, a little bit like the destroyers, is that they don't rely on a particular dynasty to work. They already can move and shoot the heavy weapons. They already have the rerolls of 1s, so they can slot into any army that's required. Now the Doomsday Arks generally work best either in the Sotek dynasty, again so that you can move and shoot those heavy weapons, or in the Nihilic dynasty, allowing you to re-roll the 1s to hit. Now, like I said, if you take it in the Sotek dynasty, you're probably going to want a Triarch Stalker to give you that re-roll ability. However, to get the most out of heavy destroyers, you're also going to need some extra things. Maybe a Lord or a Destroyer Lord to re-roll the 1s to wound, or you're going to have to use a CP to allow you to re-roll all of the hits with extermination protocols, or possibly you'll want an Overlord or maybe a Command Barge around to give you My Will Be Done. They do work independently by themselves, but to get the most out of those 3 shots from the unit of 3, you're going to need some of those extra buffs. But with the Doomsday Arks, well, if you're going to take a different dynasty, let's say you're in the Sotek dynasty but you want those re-rolls because you're not taking a Triarch Stalker, then you're going to have to take a Nihilic dynasty detachment, and that means you're going to have to take a Nihilic HQ. Probably the main choice will be a Cryptek, so that you can have it nearby the Ghost Arks and help with their living metal. But of course, if you take a Cryptek in the Nihilic dynasty, you can't buff the Sotek units with that Cryptek, so you're almost having to spend more points on a HQ that possibly you wouldn't necessarily need. Then if you're in the Sotek dynasty and you take the Triarch Stalker to give you those re-rolls, then of course you're spending points on the Triarch Stalker. So I think on the whole, as destroyers work better without all of those buffs, because they have the inherent moving and shooting and the re-roll 1s, I think the destroyers probably will get the point for that. However, what really worries me about having 3 units of 3 heavy destroyers is the unit size. Yes, we can potentially hide them a lot easier for that turn 1 alpha strike. However, at some point they will have to go into the open, and that means you could potentially be giving up some extra points. Things like kill more, Scourer of the Sky because they are fly unit, and of course potentially first strike. The Doomsday Arks are definitely more survivable, they're definitely harder to kill, and I think for that reason alone they deserve another tick. And that means that in this scenario we are at a draw. Having said that, if I'd split that Doomsday Ark gun down into, it's got a better strength, a tick, it's got a better AP, a tick, it's got a better range, a tick, well, the Doomsday Ark would actually win this particular battle. However, I think a draw is quite fair. Now, personally, I think the reason why we've got quite a close battle here is because, well, both units are actually very usable and very viable. Actually, I think that both units complement each other very well. I'm using 2 Doomsday Arks and 1 unit of heavy destroyers in my list. Heavy destroyers are quite good for mopping up what the Doomsday Ark can't kill by themselves, and where they're mobile they can get into better positions just a little bit easier. They complement each other quite well, I think, but what do you think? Let me know in the comments box below. And if you want to see my tactical video for the Ghost Ark for 2020, then there is the video that I made, and here is a comparison video that I think you'll enjoy if you liked this one. Beam me up!